Okay, hi everyone. Um, how are we with participants? Are we still waiting on a few, or is everyone in?
Um, yeah, just about everybody's in here.
Okay, thank you so much for coming today. I'll get us started. My name is Jordan Woolman. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Brown and White, and we wanted to thank you for joining us today for a discussion about media representation of marginalized communities. And we're going to have a conversation today about community first reporting at Lehigh with the Brown and White. Just a heads up before we get started, to ensure that people can view the session who may not have been able to join us today, the main room is going to be recorded, but when we break out into breakout rooms, those conversations will not be recorded. And the CCAR community conversations about race will be recording upcoming sessions as well. So I'm going to now turn it over to Megan Rubicker, who's one of the Brown and White's community engagement editors, and Megan will take it from here.
Hi, everyone. I just want to introduce what the purpose is of these community conversations about race in general. They're monthly discussions open to Lehigh University faculty, staff, students, and the greater Lehigh Valley community. The discussions will vary in content and pre-work, but the overall goal is to have honest, open communications about issues in the media and with race. Topics for discussion may come from news articles, videos, books, or works of art. You do not need to attend every session to participate, but you can choose sessions based on your schedule or your area of interest. We do have a large group today, so the large room audience will be muted. In the breakout rooms will not be, but the large audience will be. And if you have questions, comments, if you have any technical issues, please just send a message in the chat and someone from the team will assist you. Professor Swan, you can now introduce the visions guidelines.
Okay. Who's doing the slides? Oh, there we go. Okay, so just really quickly, I want to go over the guidelines for effective communication. And luckily my phone went off to let me know that I need to turn it off. It's one thing that you can do. Okay, the most important thing is to try it on. So we're going to talk about controversial things. Before you jump in with your own response, try on the position that the person who is speaking is giving. And that means just try it on for size. See what it feels like to be in that position versus the one that you hold. It's okay to disagree. We can't always reach a conclusion or come to the same conclusion. And we want that diversity of thought. Don't attack, blame, or shame yourself or others. And the self part is really important. So when you're saying something, women and minorities like to preface it with, I know this isn't important, or maybe this isn't the right thing to say. Just say it, don't preface it. Whatever you're saying counts. Practice self-focus, say I instead of we or they. Practice both and thinking. Keep both of those opposing ideas in your head at the same time instead of the word but. If you say but, it means that you negate what was said before. But if you say and, that means that you are including your thought with the other thought. Notice process and content. So if people are hanging back from the conversation, it could be either what you're talking about or it could be the way you're talking about it. So if you see people that aren't included, please try to bring them in. Be aware of intent and impact. And that's a simple thing. If somebody says something that offends you, all you have to say is ouch. And if you say something that offends someone else and they say ouch, say I'm sorry, if that's what you mean. And maintain confidentiality. This is probably the most important thing that we talk about here. When people are speaking about something personal, you should listen and attend to it. And if you want to convey that information to people outside of this space, then you convey what was said, but not necessarily who said it. And that way that allows people to feel free to speak their minds. Okay, thanks, Megan. Are you next? Who is next?
I think you can go now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Once again, we'd like to welcome you to Media Representation of Marginalized Communities, a conversation on community first reporting at Lehigh University with the Brown and White. We're so glad to have you all here for what is the first of many community forum events that the Brown and White will have. My name is M. Thampo, and I am the president of the Global Union, but today I am representing the Brown and White as a community engagement editor. To start off, I would like to thank the Community Conversations About Race Planning Committee for their support and willingness to collaborate on this event. I would also like to thank our co-sponsors, Balance, the Community Service Office, Diversity Peer Educators, FIRST, the Global Union, the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and the Pride Center for their contributions to the event and for their support. On the call today, we have members of the Brown and White staff, local journalists, community leaders, and members of the Greater Southside Bethlehem community. We thank you all for joining us. After the senseless murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota in May, the Brown and White began to discuss how we can improve our reporting in order to serve the Bethlehem community first. With today's discussion, we hope to facilitate a conversation about how our identities are portrayed in the media versus our own realities. We are interested in talking about how different communities perceive issues on campus and in the Bethlehem community. Finally, we are interested to learn about the ways in which media coverage can reflect voices that are seldom heard in the news. We are very excited to hear your insights, and we thank you again for your attendance and participation this evening. I would now like to pass things back over to Megan, who will conduct what happens next. Thank you.
Hi again. So our speaker, who I'll introduce soon, is experiencing some technical difficulties, but he's planning to get on as soon as possible. So there's a chance that he will be speaking after the breakout room, but I still would like to introduce him because he's an amazing person. His name is Reginald Jennings, Lehigh University class of 70, and he is a co-executive chair of Lehigh's Black and Latino Alumni Network Balance, which works to serve the needs and strengthen relationships of Black and Latino Lehigh alumni. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in American Studies from Lehigh University and a JD from Harvard Law School. His motto is, "No one can go back, but everyone can go forward." His work as co-executive chair of Balance pushes to move Lehigh forward in creating an equitable and inclusive environment on campus. We asked Jennings to kick off the event with his reflections on progress the Lehigh community has made, along with work that still needs to be done. I think he joined, so I welcome you to speak now.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to provide a little bit of a historical perspective, and for some reason or other, I'm showing up as Megan, on my name, but I'm the guy with the Go campaign t-shirt on, in case anyone is questioning. But one of my mantras over the last several years in leading Balance has been not my Lehigh. I have a half century of involvement with Lehigh, and Lehigh of 50 years ago was a very, very, very different place than it is now. First of all, it was all male. I was the last class before they took the first co-ed. And for those of you who think that Lehigh is challenging now, it was really kind of raunchy when it was all men. I had the experience my freshman year of being one of 3 Blacks in my class of 800. The 2 other Blacks, one was American from Pennsylvania, and the other was from Ghana. There were 10 of us in the school out of 2,000 men. I went several weeks before I saw another Black face. And at the time, Lehigh was at times hostile. In fact, I didn't know it at the time, but Dr. Frank Douglas, who in my view was one of the most distinguished Black alums of Lehigh University, he was a senior when I was a freshman, but our paths didn't cross until about 50 years ago. We never met on campus, and we didn't meet until several years ago at an event on campus. And one of the things that I learned from him is that there was a Black guy in my fraternity house who's from New Jersey. He's now a retired judge in New Jersey, who the entire time that he was there, he vowed that he would never return to Lehigh again. And he's kept that promise. He's never returned. And even though I spent a couple of years rather in intimate surroundings with him, I learned something from Dr. Douglas that I didn't know that occurred at the time. One evening, I guess, in the dormitory that Harold was resident in, there was a burning cross on the lawn. And we're talking about Lehigh in the 60s. I can imagine that this traumatized him so much that it colored his experience and his attitude toward Lehigh. My experience was a little different because I played football. it was the 60s. It was an exciting time, much like many of you are experiencing now. I love the activism of students, the involvement, engagement of students, and we were kind of like that. So having played on the football team, that put me in a kind of different posture than some of my other Black colleagues, because it gave me a wider audience. And then I didn't play football my senior year, decided to, if I wasn't going to play football, try to make Lehigh a better place. So I was one of the founders of what is now the Black Student Union. I was one of 12 students who marched into then W. Deming Lewis's office with a list of 12 demands, one of which was the M Room, which I'm really, really delighted to see is still there 50 years later. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I know that students tend to always complain, but I just wanted to give you a perspective, and not this past year, because obviously we didn't have it, but the year before last, when I went to the freshman rally, and when I looked around Stabler Arena, and when I saw more Black and brown faces than ever thought I would see at Lehigh, I was almost moved to tears. So can we do better? No question about it. Will we do better? I don't have any question about that either, but I just wanted to share a perspective that we've come a very, very, very long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Reginald. Now we will move into the breakout room discussion portion of the event. For your reference, there will be a link to a Jamboard to view the discussion questions in the chat. Thank you all for listening, and see you in 15 minutes.
Hi, everyone. You can access the discussion questions in a Jamboard that's now in the chat, and I'll open the breakout rooms now so you could engage in dialogue with others in the group.
Okay, I think almost everyone is back, but I'll let people trickle in. But I just want to remind everyone that the audience will remain muted for this portion. And we ask that note takers please add your group takeaways, comments, or questions that you discussed in the breakout rooms in the chat. And then the moderators will select comments and call on that person. And we ask that people speak for around 30 seconds, just so we can hear as many people as possible. So if you want to do that now, just send in your comments in the chat from your breakout rooms, and we can get started on that. Okay, Kendall, if you want to talk about, we talked about the importance of covering success stories as a way to uplift Bethlehem. I think that's great if you want to speak on
that. Okay, I can't unmute. My whole group spoke about this, so it wasn't just me. I just remembered that was like one of the bigger takeaways. But we kind of talked about how the south side of Bethlehem is not always viewed in the best light. There's also like if you think about the way students refer to it, for example, as like the dirty bee, it's very kind of disrespectful towards the residents. And there's also a lot of good things that go on. And it's important for the media to kind of like share what the good things as well, because like if you only see bad, you only think bad.
Okay, and then next, what about Leslie, talk about need for better representation in the editorial office?
So I will admit first that we forgot about the note taker thing. So I just took one for the team. And I'm speaking on behalf, we had a really nice conversation about how the portrayal in the media doesn't represent the reality. I think, addressing that first question. And one of the comments was that I really liked was that in order to represent represent all people well as a portrayal, you need to have the correct representation within your editorial office to begin with, because those are the voices that should be speaking on behalf. So I thought that was a nice takeaway from our group session.
Yeah, absolutely. How about Suzanne? You talked about the interactions with the university and Southside residents. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, we talked about ways that we could increase dialogue and have a greater opportunity to understand each other and to see our similarities and our differences. The soccer coach was in with us, so he was talking about some of the things that they've done through sports, and that's a great way to start to bridge that divide, that gap.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious, did you guys have any other examples of how you would like to bridge that gap?
I don't know that we talked about any specific examples other than that. And we also had the librarian with us. So we were talking about possibilities post-COVID when we can, open up the library again and have opportunities for interactions and learning from each other.
And Reginald, you've sent a few messages if you want to talk about what your breakout room talked about.
We elected a spokesperson, so I'll defer.
So we talked about how when having like these tough conversations, it has to go both ways. So even though it's very uncomfortable, it falls on both parties to have those hard conversations. And then we also had Ira. I missed what his exact title was, but he talked about the struggle of wanting to portray Lehigh accurately, but at the same time, like having that diversity, but not using like token people of color just for the sake of diversity. But how having that representation is important, but at the same time, not just like tokenizing those people. And so I think those are the highlights of our breakout room.
Okay, and do you want to introduce the next question you picked?
Sure, I can do that. So I see here from Nina, we also talked about doing features on business owners in the Southside Bethlehem community and interviews on the street to both Lehigh students and residents in the community on their experiences. Would you like to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so our group just talked about how we can engage better with like the South Bethlehem community. We talked about doing like on the street interviews, just asking people questions about like how they feel about how we engage with them, or just anything in regard to COVID-19 or in general. I don't know if that is possible in these times with Corona, since people don't really want to come close to strangers. But I also had the idea of doing more features on business owners in South Bethlehem. I think that we like grow up in these 4 years going to a lot of the storefronts like Campus Pizza or the Goose, and we get to know like a lot of the people that work there because we're always there, especially now that everybody for the most part is off campus, but we don't really know that much about their lives. So I think it'd be cool to just kind of show that we appreciate them and are interested in their lives, ask them how they feel about us as a community, and to just engage more with them in general.
Thank you. Jordan, over to you.
Professor Villanova, I liked your kind of comments in the chat. Would you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, sure. 1 second. Sorry, Jordan. Thanks for doing this. I think that, our group, we were trying to think really kind of meaningfully about what space is and what it means. And that can mean space, urban space, and it can also mean space as in the pages of a newspaper or the quotes within a story that someone is writing, and making sure that we think through all of the ways that we have to be approaching that space in the way that we take it up, or that we think about the ways that other people might occupy it and what that means, and why that can be really, really important to have what feels like an appropriately responsive and responsible stake and space. And that a lot of times unintended consequences wind up sort of, coming out. So that this example that we were talking about, we spent a lot of time, I think that our students know so much about what the lived experience on the South Side is in ways that at least I, as somebody who's fairly new to Lehigh, don't know, and how we can continue to think about the space that we take up in rooms, in classrooms, but also in media broadly.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I guess we can jump to Emma. I see that your group had a good conversation. You want to elaborate on what you guys said?
Sure. Yeah, we had a great conversation. We spoke a lot about how the divide between the Lehigh community and the Bethlehem community is a divide that neither side particularly wants, but neither side really works to rectify. And we also Dee Mulvihill brought up the idea of the brown and white kind of better engaging with the Bethlehem community and whether or not that was a possibility. I think that it kind of presents not challenges, but it definitely requires us to get out of our comfort zone. I had mentioned that we definitely, as the brown and white staff, work really hard to get a diverse amount of opinions and try to get the most sources and people who can tell every side of the story. But because of the limitations within our own staff, sometimes we have this self-affirming idea that we've told the entire story and we might still be missing those crucial voices. So just trying to better work to understand what voices need to be included.
Thanks, Emma. Now over to Lindsay. You talked about new buildings in the community. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure. So we had a discussion about, say, the new Southside Commons, specifically in the HST building, and then also what is now Farrington Square and when that was built. The conversations, when those were planned for and designed, were discussed as being gateway opportunities for the community, and ways that Lehigh could have structures that were closer to South Bethlehem or more that could engage the community more, but the community does not see it necessarily that way. They see it as actual physical barriers like walls and more fences instead. So thinking that if the relationships were different and if the community was brought into the planning phases, not just the approval phases, then that interpretation would be a lot different, hopefully more positive. That was one of our group's points.
Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to go over to Elizabeth. It looks like you had a comment.
Oh, thank you. there was just one thing that kind of struck out to me. We didn't have a note taker either. We failed at that. But one of the things that kind of resonated was that words matter. Clara put it really succinctly about how, Chief Schiffer has like brought new ways of making announcements that has kind of changed the perception of criminal records and stuff that's happening. And so that has changed the impact of what is happening and maybe changed the way that it's perceived. And that was really important. And I think that I would add to that, that if we think about how headlines, used to be, if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's what brought the news. And if we change that to a softer approach where it's a little bit more interesting and we recognize that something that's there for a fantastical reason might have more interest, but it may have a different impact on our perception and the outcome and how dangerous that can be because it can misconstrue something. So to be aware of that and maybe a little more careful with your choice making.
Can I add something to that? I see the Lehigh University Department of Theater. I had the opportunity to talk to our new director of the Zollner Performing Arts Center, and I know that his vision is not only to take events from Zollner out onto campus, but also into the community. And I think that can be a good way of improving our relationship with the community and making them feel like they're a part of what we offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's definitely part of the vision that we're trying to move the needle on, because I think that there has been this kind of invisible barrier to various communities who we've tried to do outreach to, but we're not quite connecting. And I think that through his leadership, we're going to find that connections made. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think we have time for 2 more points. So Chad, if you would like to go and elaborate on yours, that would be great.
No, I just want to throw some questions out to the atmosphere.
Okay. Then let's see. Professor Swan, did you want to elaborate on your comment or no?
Sure. Hang on for a minute. Yeah, Lehigh is not benign in this, and I will just state this right now. Lehigh, when Lehigh was first forming, it bought houses out from under people for eminent domain. There was a moment at one time where a former president wanted to move Brockle Middle School up to the top of the mountain because they wanted that space and they were blocked. I have worked with presidents that have said, maybe we could just have the highway go right past the south side because we don't want people to see the south side on their way to Lehigh. So Lehigh has been intentionally trying to ignore where it is located. So I don't give them a pass at all. Just saying.
And I'd like to throw in, this is Vivian from Bethlehem, longtime Southside resident, now Fountain Hill resident. I have lived right on 4th Street and watched Lehigh grow. I watched when, as a middle schooler, junior high at the time, felt like Lehigh was surrounded by glass and we weren't allowed to be on campus or we'd get stopped by the police. And I've seen a lot of things change to where there's a lot more engagement now. However, there's still this feeling of that property is Lehigh's and not for us. So you'll have the youth still feel that way. Like I remember kids even going into the Cup and feeling like, well, we're not really welcome here. Book bags have to stay outside. We're being watched. And so it's still this discomfort that residents have with Lehigh. And there's always a feeling like, you're not really going to stay here, right? Like you're here for college. So you're not going to contribute and want to get to know me, which I know is not necessarily true for everybody, but there is that feeling that you're here for your 4 years and you're going to move on. So you're not really looking to know us better. So there's work for us to do.
And if I just may jump in, hi everyone, I'm Carolina from the Community Service Office. Huge fan of Vivian, don't tell the world. I just wanted to say—
My tribe.
I just really wanted to say rather quickly, I know that time's near to be done, but I just wanted to say that one of the avenues available for engaging in a truly meaningful and partnership-driven way is through the Community Service Office. I know that many of the students here on this Zoom session are from the Community Service Office. We're committed to truly working in partnership with our South Bethlehem partners and truly both teaching and learning each other. There's reciprocity that drives every single thing that we do as an office. And so what Vivian says is true. I first met Vivian in the early 2000s at Brockle when I met Brockle students that had never stepped foot on Lehigh's campus. This was in 2000. That is why kids in our community helped us develop an ideal and come up with the dream that is now Spooktacular and Spring Fling and Parents Night Out, and every single initiative that our office does with our kids in our community school was created in partnership with our kids, because that invisible barrier that someone mentioned earlier feels real, and whether that intentionally was there or not, it is our duty to make sure that that barrier is eliminated and that our kids feel just as comfortable on our campus as our Lehigh students feel comfortable and our faculty and staff feel comfortable in South Bethlehem, right? It is one community and we're only as strong as we are when we are all in that shared space together. So as an office, know that that's why we're here. We're driven by reciprocity, and truly know that while we may be one of the avenues to connect with the community, I know that we're not the only ones, but we're here to work with anyone in any way that wants to truly engage and work with the community and not do things to feel like they need to dysfunctionally rescue the community or do things that then are to the community and could cause harm. Everything we do is driven by our community experts. So know that that's what we're here for. So I'll step off my soapbox. I'm sorry. I just wanted to take that avenue. I saw this was a good avenue to kind of share those thoughts, but I just really appreciate the Lehigh students, faculty, and staff for getting it and being driven by truly engaging in our community.
Just to jump into, and there's nothing that I can say to even come close to that. That was perfectly well said. The only thing that I'll add, because we do have a lot of journalism students in the room, I'm the advisor to the Brown and White, and the point that I think I want to tie all of this together to, back to the topic of media representation, is there is absolutely nothing wrong with, as a journalist, being a part of the community. And I think that that's something that's gotten lost in media so much that it feels like we've got to be this third person entity all the time, and we cover and then we leave. It should be the exact opposite of that. So as to Chad's point about what if we did just engage in ways that weren't just for seeking sound bites and quotes and stories, and I think that you'll find the results will be, when you do need those, much less friction.
Okay, are there any other comments that were either missed in the chat or that just came up that people would like to make before we close?
I have to jump in. I'm sorry. I have to add one thing. Thank you, Vivian, for your words, and Carolina and everyone else. I just want to add on top of that, that there are a lot of unwritten things that happen that I witness every single day. I watch Brockle students walk by and they're being trailed by police officers, you know, a block or two behind. Intimidation through policies, intimidation of that nature is evident if you're looking. And as a person who lived for many years on the South Side, I found, you know, that there was this disconnect, not only like between the community and the Art Center, but also with Lehigh, in a way that I constantly had to fight. It's not scary. It's not a terrifying space. And the perceptions are very skewed from both directions. And I have tried for all my time here to try and connect that, and I don't know what to do about it. And it's really frustrating. And I think that it begins with the messaging, it begins with the impact of our words, and it begins with our perceptions being skewed by these like policies to alienate each other. We're all scared to talk to each other, and that has to stop. We have to talk to each other. I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox. I'll stop now. I know we're over time.
If I may just add to that, The comment that you made, Elizabeth, also applies within our community, because one of the things that I've heard from students of color is they feel the same thing that people in the community do with the police. That's been one of the issues. And one of the things that we talked about in our group is within just the Lehigh community and the family, there's still work to be done.
Okay, well, there's a bunch of things we can do here. We can close because it is 6. We can let people go. If people want to continue to talk, we can talk. But it is 6 o'clock. So I can let those people go that want to go. Thank you very much for coming. Does anybody have anything else they want to add?
Anyone? Oh, sorry. Hi, my name's Caroline. I'm the design editor for the Brown and White. I coincidentally got in the same breakout room as Annalise. She is our photo editor, and it was kind of perfect. We were discussing just about the print and how we can do stuff in the print better and use different photos, and even bring our print to different areas and try to get it out there more and receive more feedback from the community that way. So I just wanted to make that note as I head into creating our edition for Friday.
That sounds great. Anybody else? Anyone? We have like open floor now if anybody wants to speak, and I cannot see everyone's hand, so I think people need to speak up.
One thing our group had talked about was, you know, this disconnect between the community and this perception of Bethlehem as a very dangerous place. And I think it's because, you know, there's a lot of, you know, a vast majority of Lehigh students are upper middle class white students. And I think that the unfortunate reality of this is because, you know, this is the first time they're really seeing a lot of diversity. And I think, you know, just because of the way everything is, you know, we've been racistly conditioned to believe that these Black and brown people are, you know, they're, you know, a danger or threat to us, but that's not the case at all. You know, I've lived in Lehigh for the past 5 years, and I've never felt, you know, unsafe. And I think that it's really unfortunate that, you know, these students continue to believe, you know, that this is a dangerous place to be, and it isn't. You know, it's not dangerous at all. And I think it's really unfortunate that this happens. And, you know, I wonder, you know, what can we do to sort of break down these stigmas and that are just completely baseless. So.
Hi, my name's Julia. I'm a reporter for the Brown and White. Going off of everything that you just said there, like, I think that the big problem and like the disconnect between the communities is that, like, it's the few certain people that stick out that make us feel like the majority of, like, it makes us feel like everyone's that way when that's definitely not true, and it goes on both ends. Like, if a Southside community member has like a bad experience with a Lehigh student and generalizes that all of them are that way, kind of thing. And the same thing that, like, if one student has an unsafe, dangerous situation while walking through the Southside Bethlehem community, like, the students are going to generalize it. And I think that's the part that like needs to change, where people realize that like not everyone is that way. Like, not all students disregard the Southside Bethlehem community, and like not all Southside residents are like dangerous people we should be scared of. And I feel like that is a big part of it. Also, going like off what Jessica just said, like in the chat, like this is also definitely the first time in my like 2.5-3 years at Lehigh that I've like heard like from residents of the South Side like this, which is like saying a lot. And like I'm personally very grateful to have like been here and gotten the chance to like hear from you guys and meet you guys, because I think that this should happen. This should be more normalized and something that occurs more often. So I'll definitely go out of my way to do that more, but thank you guys.
Sort of going off of that, in my breakout room, I was with Professor DeMaio, and we were speaking about her community canvassing assignment that she has us do in writing for the media too, an advanced journalism class. And I think sort of the concept of that assignment is so important, and everything that we were sort of talking about, sort of forcing students to go out into the community and find out issues that residents care about and things that they want to know more about, and just sort of engage in the community in that way. In addition to that, we do community organization stories and community issues stories, and again, sort of make students pop the Lehigh bubble, so to speak, and figure out like the bigger picture and what's going on in the community, and sort of forcing you to immerse in the community and figure out all that it has to offer, the South Bethlehem community outside of Lehigh, which is so important. I think the journalism department here offers so many similar opportunities like that, even just like through the Brown and White, and we definitely have a lot more to go in that regard. But I think recently we've done a lot of trying to cover the community more than we have ever had. For me, over the past few years, I've learned about so many different organizations and issues that exist that I wouldn't have known about previously. So again, just sort of pushing that aspect and sort of encouraging students that, you know, don't have to for an assignment or don't have to for a story to sort of immerse themselves in all of what Bethlehem has to offer and sort of break these stigmas that Lehigh students may have.
Hi everyone, I'm Noor. I'm with Diversity Peer Educators, and something that I think is really important that Lehigh needs to step up with is advertising the Southside Bethlehem community before students even come there. Like as a freshman 3 years ago, I had no idea that South Bethlehem was as vibrant and as amazing as it is. And I think that's a fault of the administration and not advertising that through their websites or through admissions like interviews and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like we definitely need to step it up with that.
So just to follow up, what role do you think the Brown and White has in doing that?
Well, I don't know. I feel like when I was searching for schools as a senior in high school, like I would always read the student newspapers and just to see like what's going on in the community surrounding the school. And for Lehigh, I never really saw anything about South Bethlehem. It was always more about like things that were going on campus. And like obviously that's changed over the years, but I just think that if the Brown and White can maybe like have a weekly portion about things that are going on in the South Bethlehem community, that could probably help a lot, like put things into perspective for possible students.
Yeah, I really like that as the information delivery vehicle that the press can play, you know, in addition to covering issues. And I take to Emma's point in the chat where, you know, as she had said, it doesn't help the perception of the South Side when anything bad that happens, that gets amplified and emailed to everybody around campus, when the, you know, festivals or events and all of that, you know, doesn't get that same treatment. And I think for the editors and reporters in the room, that could be a really big avenue of the things that we've talked about of how do we become a community source of news in an area that is, and one of our breakouts we discussed, you know, typically covered by the existing local media that have been here forever in a way that's like bad things happen, we come in and then we leave kind of thing. It could be interesting. I love that.
And to that point, because I love that idea too, there's so much emphasis now, especially with COVID, on small businesses really needing so much support from the community. So this would be a phenomenal opportunity to enhance and lift up those voices in the community. There's so many diverse businesses that can really use that. And I think that students can also really gain so much by understanding the community, by actually being a part of and taking, you know, going and attending some of those businesses and seeing what is offered in the community. There's a lot of two-way ways to really interact with each other. And especially now with COVID, I think this would be an ideal time to do that.
I just wanted to add, the CSO Instagram has been highlighting Bethlehem Bites, different locations in the South Side, and like what are people's favorite meals at the different locations, because sometimes you look at the menu and you're like, I don't know what I'm gonna have. And so that, if you all can make it better, which I'm sure you could, that would be amazing, especially because, as Clara said, like our local businesses have been hurting. And for us, I think of how many times do our student clubs, organizations, fraternities, sororities, the CSO ask for donations from our local businesses, and how many times do we actually get countless donations, right? We get all kinds of incredible donations. So this is our time to show up, right? Like, let's show up for our community, just like they've shown up for us consistently when we want to have not Sodexo food at our events. So let's show up for our teams, you know, for our community. So if check it out, I'm sure you guys could think of something way cooler to do, but we just wanted to highlight some of our favorite South Side places.
And just to add to that, there's also other businesses outside of food that you could also support, right? There's so many other types of businesses around the South Side area, Bethlehem area. And just one more point of emphasis, if they were not there, can you imagine what the Lehigh experience would be? It just wouldn't be the same. So it's not, you know, not to be selfish, but in a lot of ways, we would really miss out on a phenomenal Lehigh experience if our Southside businesses were not there.
I just wanted to add, if I may, two quick things. One is to be very careful, and this is not intended to be directed at any one singular speaker or anything like that. But a lot of times when people say the word community, you know, oh, we care about the community, the Southside community. What are we actually talking about? We're talking about our neighbors. We're talking about people. We're not talking about some vague concept. And in particular, sometimes the word community, you know, in these types of conversations stands in for when what we're really talking about are Black and brown neighbors, right? And so to be very careful about, and again, this is not like directed at any singular person, but just that this idea that we don't kind of have this vague idea of quote unquote the community, and that we could be a little bit more specific because we're talking about people. And the second is that community is not something that gets spoken into existence and then just exists, right? It's something that is constantly being made and remade, and that it's important that this is something that can be generous and generative and generated. And so what does it mean to be in community with people? That this is a kind of active process more than something that we speak about. So just like something that was jumping out to me, because that word's been coming up a lot, and I think it's really worthwhile to think about what we mean when we say it. This is great, by the way. Thank you to the Brown and White editors for doing this. Y'all are amazing.
If I may just piggyback off of that, just the thought of being active and activity. You know, we talk about positive marketing and things like that. Some of the best marketing is the word of mouth marketing. And the relationships that students have with each other, whenever you have a positive experience with someone in the community, talk about it. That sort of counters all of the negative things that are broadcast in you know, throughout the internet or hawk watch messages. When people hear and they know someone that's had a positive experience, that can be more impactful than what was actually, you know, in the Brown and White itself. So not to say that we don't do anything in the Brown and White itself, but, you know, going back to that sense of community and communing and being with and interacting, that's sometimes more important.
Yeah, going along with that, with word of mouth and how powerful that is, we actually learned that in all of my marketing classes, that is the most powerful way to spread a message. So I completely agree with that. And on top of that, I feel like as a student, like the difference between my first year here and now, I'm a senior. I think now I've really realized how important those small interactions are with community members. It doesn't always have to be like some huge event that brings us together in some kind of contrived way. It can sometimes just be going to Seatown and having a really nice conversation with the cashier, or having a nice conversation with someone on the street, or your neighbor if they're a resident of South Bethlehem. So that's something that I wish was more encouraged upon arrival at Lehigh. And I think it is becoming more encouraged, so that's good.
Anyone else? Oh, yes, no? Okay, I'm reluctant to close this down, but you know, it's almost 6:30. Some of us have to eat or sleep. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so thank you, everyone. This was wonderful. I love the meeting after the meeting, which is when the real discussion always happens. And we can't do after meetings now. That's the meeting where the doors all close and everybody goes out and the hall goes. We can't do that. So that's what we were doing. We were doing the meeting after the meeting, which is great. It really, really is. I encourage everyone to find, if you're living on the South Side, see if you know the person next to you or not. And think about that. If you don't know who your neighbor is, think about that. I live alone now. I had people in my house for a while. I don't anymore. And I was thinking this morning, you know, if I died here, no one would even know I was dead. And I know my neighbors. You should know your neighbors, and you should check in on your neighbors, and you should be aware of what they're doing, and you should pay attention to them. And if you don't know your neighbors, you should think about that. Why don't you know them? And all you have to do is when you see them, just say hi. Just say hi. You don't have to introduce, say hi. And if you do that enough, you'll start a conversation eventually. And it's really important to do. It really, really is, because that's what builds community, that word that John is struggling with. That's the reason that I think of community as a verb and not as a noun. Okay, that's how I think of it. So I think that it's something that you build or you create or you make. I don't think it's something that is a static thing. So anyway, thank you all. If you have any additional questions or thoughts or comments, send them to me, send them to Tara. I want to thank Tara, who is amazing at getting this thing off the ground. I want to thank the Brown and White people who are also amazing at getting this thing off the ground. This was a lot of work. Thank you, Balance. All the people that were listed earlier, which I don't remember who they were, but everybody. Thank you. And thank you, community, for coming and speaking up. As you can see, your voices are incredibly important. And I hope you keep coming to these, because this is what we are trying, what everybody wants to do. That's what these are supposed to do. Broaden that conversation so that whenever we get out of the hell that we are in, we will be able to have these conversations in person, and we will feel comfortable about doing it. Now is the time to practice these skills, and that's what we are doing. So thank you. And thank you everyone that stayed for the extra 20 minutes. It was very enlightening. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great evening.